based on the response and based on the interest of the devotees who join the course, we want to basically start having regular Bhagavatam Sangha at this time every Saturday, and with an objective of covering Srimad Bhagavatam by chapter for the first 6 cantos. The first 6 cantos of Srimad Bhagavatam, in one sense, is being covered in Bhakti Vaibhav courses worldwide. I wouldn't want to call this Bhakti Vaibhav course. There can be, as the future, as we develop things, as we go further, based on interest, we could have a session of some important points for people to learn and so on and so forth. But this is not a Bhakti Vaibhav course, but it is going to cover the 6th canto in detail. I'm sorry, 6 cantos, the first 6 cantos in detail. So what we are going to do is we're going to take a chapter a week. We're going to study 1 chapter per session. And what we will be doing is I'm going to bring up the highlights of the chapter. So it's going to be a chapter by chapter study of the Srimad Bhagavatam. For those of you who are doing a home study course of Srimad Bhagavatam, this would be of extraordinary use, because you could get a gist of the chapter, and you could also go into the text and you could have a grasp of it. If some of you are enrolled in Bhakti Vaibhav courses elsewhere, then this could also give you a glimpse, or I would say a more detailed view of a chapter by chapter analysis of Srimad Bhagavatam in a certain context, scriptural context. So which is the whole purpose? The purpose is to have Bhagavad Sangha, which is one of the most important elements of our daily practice. Of the 5 important angas of bhakti, the most important anga is Bhagavad Shravanam for Kali Yuga, and we're going to go into it in a bit. Now, can everybody turn your screen to mute, please? Can you mute yourself, because there's some feedback coming in as I hear it? Yeah, this is better. So what we are going to do is we're going to study Srimad Bhagavatam, and we're going to study it on a chapter by chapter basis. And we're going to do 1 session a week. And if I notice that the chapter is quite long, then I might extend it to 2 weeks. So there is some flexibility in terms of the subject matter that's going to be covered. And what we will do is we could also make, this is an interactive session. You could ask questions, and it will always happen at the same time every week. It's going to be through the medium of Zoom. Christina is very kindly organizing and coordinating, and she's the one who is going to be sending out the link. And you could also write me in private if you have questions, or you could raise questions during the session. I'll be very happy to assist you in your study. So the idea is to come together so that we could study Srimad Bhagavatam. So let's get started with the first session. What I am going to do is I'm going to offer an introduction today. And this introduction itself could be somewhat of a summary recap for many of you who have been with me for the last 5 weeks. But for newcomers, it could give you a glimpse as to what the approach is going to be, what the priorities are, etc. And then I can open up for some questions, and we could take on a few questions today, and then we will proceed further as the chapter goes on. Because the first chapter is actually quite extraordinarily important, as it is setting the stage. And in that case, what I would do is cover it in more than 1 session. But today's session would be an introduction. There could be a bit of a recap, and then there could be Q&A, and then we could set the stage for us to be able to move forward. So our approach is somewhat practical in the sense that we address questions and also give certain solutions from Shastra for people who are practicing in the modern world. It is not so much a scriptural study in the strictest sense. It has more to do with being able to take scripture and apply it, and being able to modify our desires and our life for us to be able to achieve the goals set by Srimad Bhagavatam. So the idea is to integrate ourselves and to be able to live the Bhagavatam at some point. So how do you extract principles that would allow us to live the Bhagavatam? Hearing Srimad Bhagavatam is meant to facilitate living Srimad Bhagavatam, and that requires an understanding of being able to extract principles from Srimad Bhagavatam that can be incorporated into day-to-day life, and which would allow us to be able to change our desires and our future based on the principles of Srimad Bhagavatam. So let's begin today's discussion. It's an introduction. It could be a recap, and then we will have a Q&A. Narayana namaskrityam naram chaiva narottamam Devim Saraswatim Vyasam Tato Jayam Mudirayet Shanvatam Swakata Krishna Punyashravana Kirtana Hridayanto Sihi Bhadrani Vidunoti Suhrit Satam Nashtaprayeshu Abhadreshu Nityam Bhagavata Sevaya Bhagavati Uttama Shloke Bhaktir Bhavati Naishtiki Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. So before we go into Srimad Bhagavatam, there is a necessity for us to be able to go into the Bhagavad Gita to understand the approach to Srimad Bhagavatam. I have given this principle and I've shared this principle in previous sessions that there's a certain sequence. We learn from the Bhagavad Gita as to what the approach to a Srimad Bhagavatam should be. And we're going to follow the same approach here, where we would be going into the Bhagavad Gita, we would be studying a few verses from the Bhagavad Gita. Using those verses, we would then go into the Srimad Bhagavatam to understand Srimad Bhagavatam better. So the first and the most important verse for us to begin with, it has to do with chapter 4, and the verse is 4.9. The 4.9 verse reads as follows: Janma karma chame divyam yovam vetti tattvataha tektva deham punarjanmanaiti mameti so arjuna. So Janma karma chame divyam evam yo vetti tattvataha tektva deham punarjanma naiti mam eti so arjuna. One who knows the transcendental nature of my appearance and activities does not, upon leaving the body, take his birth again in this material world, but attains my eternal abode, O Arjuna. So Krishna is basically making a statement in this verse, and the specific word which is being highlighted is evam yo vetti tattvataha, one who knows the transcendental nature of my appearance and activities. Tattvataha is the word which is being indicated, and tattva essentially means absolute. So Krishna is basically saying, if you understand me on an absolute consideration, on an absolute basis, you would then come to me and you would not return back to this world. So the word tattvataha essentially means absolute. So what exactly is the word absolute? Why does it have to be so important? Why is it such a big focus in the Bhagavad Gita, where Krishna is making a very clear statement that we have to understand him in the absolute consideration? The Srimad Bhagavatam is the essence, or I would say it's a natural commentary on Vedic scripture. We use the word natural commentary because sage Vedavyasa, who compiled all the Puranas, who compiled the three Vedas, basically the three Vedas of Rig, Yajur, and Sama, has parts of Atharva also in it. There are four Vedas. There's Rig, Yajur, Sama, and Atharva Veda. Atharva Veda is basically an extracted version from the three primary Vedas. In other words, Atharva Veda was integrated into Rig, Yajur, Sama, and then it was disintegrated and presented as a separate topic. In any case, the author of Srimad Bhagavatam is also the compiler of the Vedas. He is the author and the compiler of the Puranas. He is the author and the compiler of the Vedanta Sutra. So most schools of religion extract verses from the Vedas, which basically are used for the purpose of establishing a path which has to extend beyond the objective of the Vedas. So the idea is for them to go beyond the Vedas, and that's the reason why it is called Veda Anta. Anta means the end. Where the Vedas end, Vedanta begins. The objectives of the Vedas is to accomplish fruitive activities. The objective of the Vedas is to be able to follow the primary aspects of life, such as how do you execute Dharma? And if you execute Dharma properly, if you perform your duties properly, then the duties themselves would lend to pious results. You would gain in piety. People would become rich in piety, and if they are rich in piety, they would have the ability to fulfill their desires, because piety is wealth. So Dharma, Artha, which is the whole idea of managing the wealth and managing resources, is a matter of coming in touch with resources because one has performed the duties. If one is executing their duties properly, then they gain piety, they gain pious reactions. These pious reactions are subtle wealth. It gives them the ability to buy their desires. So this is very, very important. This is transcendental. I would say this is subtle economics. The subtle economics is that if one is performing their duty according to scripture, one has the ability to earn pious results. If one has the ability to earn pious results, then they have the ability to fulfill their desires. So dharma is done nicely. It results in artha, which is pious results, and then it allows us to accumulate karma. In other words, it allows us to execute and to be able to fulfill our desires, which is karma. So dharma, artha, kama. Now, this is the subject matter of the main body of the Vedas. It basically guides one on how to accomplish their duty. It guides one on how to accomplish and manage resources, artha. It guides one on how to accomplish and basically fulfill the desires, which is kama. Why is it that some of us desire and it happens immediately? And why is it that some of us desire and then it does not happen? Some of us desire and then it happens quickly. Events take place in life. In general, I'm not talking about the aspect of spirituality, I'm talking about in general, is because they have certain piety which has been accumulated from the past, and that piety allows them to fulfill certain desires. So in some cases, if we ask for results, it immediately comes through because of the fact that there is currency which is available for us to fulfill our desires. So dharma has already been done, piety has been gained, and then if there's desiring, desires get fulfilled. So the whole subject matter of the main body of the Vedas is for us to understand how to walk on the path of dharma, what kind of rituals to perform for us to be able to fulfill our desires, how do we accumulate artha, how do we accumulate currency in the subtle platform. In other words, what is it that we ought to do for us to be able to become rich in the subtle manner, which would allow us and give us the facility to spend and to accumulate and to be able to spend and to be able to achieve our desires. So this is the subject matter of the Vedas. Now, when all of this is exhausted because the person is tired and they're exhausted of material life, they're exhausted of fulfilling the desires, and they feel that there's more to life than just merely working towards accumulating and then to be able to somehow or the other make arrangements for sense gratification, then the whole subject matter of Veda Anta begins. Anta means to end, and Vedanta begins after the end of the subject matter of fruitive activity to achieve desires. Now, when fruitive activity, which is to achieve desires in life, does not, when we reach frustrations in general, when they are on their own, it is just suffering. When frustrations are combined with spiritual prowess, then one has the ability to transform that suffering into realization. Then they have the ability to end the suffering in certain ways. And they also have the ability to not to repeat the condition which caused suffering in the first place. So this suffering, by coming in touch with fruitive activity, keep performing activities which are going to result in certain kind of sense gratification. We get bored of all the sense gratification, or our attempts at sense gratification become frustrated because the results themselves are not what we thought it ought to be. Then one develops gyan, knowledge, and this knowledge allows them to develop detachment. And this detachment allows them to be able to make progress. They then become more progressive because they start thinking, what's the point? Why should we pursue this path again? So the Vedas provide you with the ability to achieve fruitive results by giving you various ways of achieving fruitive results. For example, the Rig Veda has many different mantras. The mantras of many different aspects of demigods are given in the Rig Vedas. Rituals are given. And then also the Sama Veda is very confidential as it glorifies the Lord. But the Vedas are distributed mainly for the purpose of fulfilling desires. So it's fruitive activity. So what is being said here is that one basically is able to fulfill the desires. They then develop frustration because some of the desires don't satisfy them. Then there is something called material exhaustion. And at that point, questions come in the head of the soul saying, why am I doing this? Why am I repeating the same activity again and again? This is gyan, this is knowledge, this is realization. And then they proceed towards wanting to completely end the cycle of birth and death, and that is moksha. So you have these 4 cycles, or rather 4 objectives of dharma, artha, kama, moksha, and it requires material exhaustion to begin the whole idea of liberation. I don't want to do this anymore. All of this is a topic of the Vedas and the Vedanta Sutras. The Vedanta Sutra are the conclusive aspect. In other words, once the fruitive activity ends, the Vedanta begins. There are approximately 550 verses, and these 550 verses form the body of the Vedanta Sutra. Every major philosophical house in Vedic times, and I'm talking about Sri Shankaracharya, Sri Ramanujacharya, Vishnu Swami, Nimbakacharya, all of them had commentaries on the 550 verses. So they had the Vedanta Sutras and they had commentaries. It was called Bhashya. Bhashya means to give a commentary. And all of these different schools, both Vaishnavite and non-Vaishnavite, have commentaries on the Vedanta Sutra, which is the 550 verses. So the idea is, when Mahaprabhu started the movement 500 years back, he felt that there was absolutely no need for any of our Gaudiya Vaishnava Acharyas to write a commentary on the 550 verses. And why is it so? The reason is that the treasure of the Gaudiya Vaishnavas is Srimad Bhagavatam. Srila Vyasadeva, who wrote the Vedas, who compiled the Vedas, and he put together the 550 verses, he was despondent. He wasn't satisfied after doing all of this. In the state of dissatisfaction, Sri Narad Muni, his spiritual master, arrives there and wants to instruct him on why he is dissatisfied. He's trying to seek answers within himself. Srila Vyasadeva, why am I dissatisfied? Sri Narad Muni appears and he gives him ideas. He's saying, you are dissatisfied because you have not done an exclusive work which is completely free from the motivation for sense gratification. You haven't done a work which is completely free from the motivation for even liberation. You haven't done anything which is completely free of material objectives of even liberation from matter or achieving matter. You have done everything else. And they are at times also leading to the fact of moksha, liberation. They're talking about the Supreme Personality of Godhead. The Puranas talk about Krishna in different ways and his different avatars. But there's still the tinge and the contamination of material sense gratificatory propensity. There's still the tinge of wanting to offer the feature of wanting to achieve aspects in the material world. It's not uncontaminated and it is not pure. Srila Vyasadeva was dissatisfied because all of that, what he had done, was a combination of taking one from one stage of consciousness ultimately to reach them to the consciousness of wanting to leave the material sphere. This was highly dissatisfactory for him, and quite obviously so, because you can't be satisfied merely by leaving matter. You need engagement beyond matter. It was extraordinarily dissatisfying in terms of the contribution. He was quite despondent, and when he was despondent and grieving, saying, why am I, after doing all of this for the Supreme Lord, still feeling so dissatisfied? His spiritual master, Sri Narad Muni, pointed out that you haven't done a compilation, you haven't done a work which is exclusively focused on the principles of pure devotional service, completely freed from the objective of sense gratification, completely freed from the objective of liberation. Anya bilashita shunyam, jnana karmadi anavritam. This is the definition of pure bhakti given by Srila Rupa Goswami. Anya bilashita shunyam, jnana karmadi anavritam, anukulyena krishna anushilanam bhaktiruttama. Srila Vyasadeva had not written a work which exclusively tied itself to this definition of pure devotional service given by Srila Rupa Goswami. Of course, Srila Rupa Goswami appeared many, many years after Srila Vyasadeva, but I'm just trying to give you a principle. Since he had not done this, he was dissatisfied. And it's a fact. There would be dissatisfaction even for those who are liberated, because being liberated from matter does not mean one is engaged in a relationship with the Supreme. That distinction still remains, and Srila Vyasadeva was very despondent. He was actually quite sad about it. Now, that particular despondency was cured when he authored the Srimad Bhagavatam, which is called Puranam Amalam, which is completely pure. It fits into the definition of Srila Rupa Goswami's Anyabilashita Shunyam, Jnana Karmadi Anuvratam, Anukuliyena Krishna Anushilanam Bhakti Uttama. It fits perfectly into the definition of what is pure bhakti. Srimad Bhagavatam is the Supreme Personality of Godhead Himself. We spoke about this earlier. Krishna appears and he disappears. Srimad Bhagavatam appears and disappears as well. Krishna and Srimad Bhagavatam are non-different. If Krishna, during his appearance on the planet, has a so-called father and mother, Srimad Bhagavatam also has father and mother. The combined father and mother is Srila Vyasadeva. It is Srila Vyasadeva who practically gave birth to Srimad Bhagavatam. So Srimad Bhagavatam is Krishna himself. It is transcendental. It is not literature. It is not. We have a copy of Srimad Bhagavatam, non-different from Krishna. If you have a deity of Krishna at home and you have a copy of Srimad Bhagavatam at home, non-different. And both of these are non-different from the original personality of Godhead. They're completely non-different. The Archavigraha of Krishna, the deity of Krishna, Srimad Bhagavatam, they are non-different from Krishna himself. So they have a very, very mystical, transcendental aspect of being able to independently give mercy. So Srimad Bhagavatam, being in the house, can independently grant benedictions. And you come in touch with Srimad Bhagavatam. Opening the Srimad Bhagavatam even randomly and reading a verse on a daily basis can actually be extraordinarily rewarding. So it can be something which you would notice is actually very guiding, but you should approach it very prayerfully. Given the fact that Srimad Bhagavatam is non-different from Krishna, if you approach Srimad Bhagavatam prayerfully and you approach Srimad Bhagavatam with the motivation of wanting to come in touch with Krishna, just as Krishna wanted us to in Kali Yuga, then a lot of things will be revealed as you come in touch with the scripture. As you hold the book, a lot of things will be revealed. If you think of it as literature, if you think of it as a book, then it remains confidential because it is confidential. If you understand the fact that it is not different from Krishna, then a lot of things become revealed. So the idea is Srila Vyasadeva in his despondency wrote the Srimad Bhagavatam because the Srimad Bhagavatam was written by someone who had already written all the Vedas. He had compiled the Vedas. He had put together the Vedanta Sutras. He had compiled and he had put together the Puranas. If someone does all of that and then feels dissatisfied and then takes all his realizations and then puts them into a work, and that work is Srimad Bhagavatam, then that is a natural commentary on the Vedas. It is a natural commentary because the personality who worked on the Vedas and who worked on everything else is now projecting his realizations, is presenting something so pure, unsullied, uncontaminated by fruitive desires, uncontaminated even with the motivation of wanting freedom from the material world. It's talking about pure bhakti. That's a natural commentary on the Vedas. One can say that that's the far end and the conclusion of the actual principle of Vedic knowledge. And as a consequence, Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu and our acharyas, the 6 Goswamis, at that point, 500 years back, did not feel that they had to write a commentary on the Vedanta Sutra like every other school of philosophy, every other Vaishnavite school, Vaishnavite branch. They were very heavily challenged because of this. The challenge occurred 300 years after Mahaprabhu, approximately 250 years. 250 years. I think it was the 17th century, which was basically Srila Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur's time. The challenge occurred. They were challenged, the Gaudiya Vaishnavas were challenged, the theology was challenged by other schools saying that you don't have a basis for what you practice. You don't have a basis because your school does not have a commentary on the Vedas, Vedanta Sutras. They do not have a commentary on the Vedanta Sutras. Then that led Srila Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur to bless the great Madhva, originally Madhva Sampradaya scholar, Baladev Vidyabhushan, who then became became a student and a disciple of Srila Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur. He commissioned him and gave him blessings. Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur was quite advanced in age. He gave him blessings. And it is said that he prayed to Radha Govinda in Jaipur. And he offered prayers to Sri Sri Radha Govinda in Jaipur. Sri Sri Radha Govinda were in Jaipur because they were taken away from Vrindavan because of fear that the Mughal emperor, the Muslims would come and they would destroy the temple and destroy the deity. So Radha Govinda ji were in Jaipur. So Baladev Vidyabhushan, he prayed to Radha Govinda ji and he wrote a commentary on the Vedanta Sutras. He wrote a commentary of 550 verses. He wrote this entire commentary within a span of 7 nights. It is said that Radha Govinda ji themselves came and dictated the commentary. As a consequence, our commentary on the 550 verses of the Vedanta Sutra is called the Govinda Bhashya. It was because it was Govinda himself who comes and assists Baladev Vidyabhushan. It is a momentous task. It takes an entire lifetime to do that, but it was done in 7 days. It was quite phenomenal. It is called Govinda Bhashya. Then the Gaudiya Vaishnava theology was accepted. Why did we not do it? Why did we have to wait until the 18th, the 17th, and the 18th century? Because Mahaprabhu did not feel there was any need for us to have a commentary, simply because we have Srimad Bhagavatam. Srimad Bhagavatam, in one sense, has been authored and written for the Gaudiya Vaishnavas. So the place of Srimad Bhagavatam in our life is very significant, even though other schools and other Vaishnava schools do read Srimad Bhagavatam on a daily basis. They consider the principles of Srimad Bhagavatam as sacrosanct. They basically base their teachings on Srimad Bhagavatam as well. But for us, it holds a special place. Why does it hold a special place? Srimad Bhagavatam was the main philosophical basis and the foundation for Mahaprabhu. Every day, during the day, Sriman Mahaprabhu would have his servant Gadadhar Pandit Prabhu basically read Srimad Bhagavatam. There would be 2 stories, 2 sections of Srimad Bhagavatam which Mahaprabhu would want Gadadhar Pandit Prabhu to read. He would have him read Dhruva Charita. He will then have him read Prahalad Charita. During the day, Mahaprabhu will repeatedly listen to Dhruva Charita and Prahalad Charita. And during the night, he would basically interact with Sri Ramananda Raya. He would interact with Swarup Damodar Prabhu. He would interact with his more intimate associates on different aspects of Rasa Tattva. But then during the day, he used to talk about Dhruva Charita and Prahalad Charita because those were very important topics which he used to focus on. Sriman Mahaprabhu basically founded the entire movement on the foundation of Srimad Bhagavatam. As a consequence, it was very dear to him. And that in turn is also the reason why there was absolutely nothing which was done back in the day for them to write any commentaries, because the Srimad Bhagavatam is completely self-sufficient in providing everything for us. Now, the other aspect which we want to talk about is the verse from the Bhagavad Gita. This is very important for all of you who are joining today and those of you who attended the first session to have a quick recap on. We understand the Puranas and the Vedas talk about Krishna as God. They classify Krishna as God. We talk about the idea of God being the creator, the maintainer, and destroyer. But Krishna in the Bhagavad Gita is saying that's not enough. That's what he means when he says, you have to understand me through tattva. In chapter 4 Bhagavad Gita, the 9th verse, when he's saying that you have to understand me through tattva, he is basically telling you and me and everyone else, saying, just knowing me as God is not going to help you come to me. Just knowing me as the maintainer, creator, destroyer, as the conception of the all-knowing, omniscient God, the source of all, and so on and so forth, is not going to allow you to come to me. You have to understand me through tattva. So that's the reason why we have to make a distinction between the word God and the word absolute truth. Why is Krishna saying you have to understand me as the absolute consideration? You have to understand me on an absolute platform. What is the difference between the conception of Krishna as God versus Krishna as absolute truth? The difference is Krishna as God is the definition of him being the maintainer, the creator, maintainer, destroyer. The absolute truth is Krishna as a person. The absolute truth allows us to understand that Krishna as a person, Krishna who in the particular realm of Vraja, in Goloka, in that particular person, what does he wear? He likes to wear a certain kind of dress. He likes to keep a peacock feather on his head. He likes to wear a certain kind of beads. These are the names of his personal associates. This is what he likes to eat. This is exactly what his mother experienced. This is what his friends experienced. This is what he did when there was a crisis in Vraja, when there were torrential rains. He lifted up the Govardhan hill. This is what was supposed to have been given to the gopis and the gopas during that particular pastime. What is Krishna as a boy? Who is Krishna in Vraja in the different relationships? Now, this is the absolute nature of God. It covers who he is on a personal basis. If we can't figure out the personal aspect, we can't meditate on the personal aspect, which is exactly what he's talking about in 4.9, saying you have to understand me on an absolute consideration. You have to understand me on the principle of absolute truth. You have to understand me as the absolute truth. You have to know everything about me as a person. And then you will develop a relationship with me. And when you develop a relationship with me, you will come to me. This is the most confidential teaching of the Bhagavad Gita. Manmanabo madbhakto madhyaji mam namaskuru. Yeah, 9.32, 9.34, and then again 18.65. Repetition. What's the difference between God and absolute truth? In God, we understand him as the summum bonum. We understand him as the creator, maintainer, destroyer. As an absolute truth, we have the opportunity to have an intimate relationship with him in his features of, the cowherd boy in Vraja. There's a big difference between the two. And this applies to other avatars as well. He wants us to know him on an absolute basis as a person and develop a relationship in one of the most important 4 different classifications. Mahaprabhu used 4. He said dasya, which is servitude, then sakya, friendship, vatsalya as a parent, and then the 5th is madhurya in a conjugal or in the relationship of being one of Srimati Radharani's servants who is assisting Srimati Radharani. These are 4 primary relationships. Now he's telling Arjun in 4.9 of the Bhagavad Gita that you should understand me in tattva. You should understand me on an absolute scale. If you understand me on an absolute consideration as the absolute truth, if you understand me fully as a person, you develop a relationship with me because now you're coming to me in one of the 4 primary relationships, then you wouldn't come back to this world. This is exactly what he means with Janma Karma Chame Divyam. Yovam Vavetti Tattvataha. He is basically saying you have to understand me through tattva. What's the difference between Srimad Bhagavatam and other scriptures? Srimad Bhagavatam begins and focuses on the absolute consideration of Krishna as the supreme personality of Godhead, but also as in his personal feature. The most confidential aspects of Krishna are also being described and glorified in the 10th canto. And then you have the lives of great devotees with their accomplishments, which is what we also do. Our approach is going to be to study devotees again. When we go through chapters, we're going to study the devotees of the chapters. We're going to again touch upon the person devotee, which is the person Bhagavat, as we study Srimad Bhagavatam, the literary Bhagavat. When we come in touch with the person Bhagavat, we understand the principle of what is the behavior of one who is in the Bhagavatam, and we also are going to study the Srimad Bhagavatam, then the absorption becomes easier. So Krishna is saying, develop this relationship with me, which is the whole idea. Srimad Bhagavatam is different because it is unsullied by principles of fruitive activity. It is unsullied by motivation for liberation. It is pure in the objective of giving and granting pure devotional service. Srimad Bhagavatam is also the essence of the idea of being able to develop relationships with Krishna. So this is the difference. Now let's also look at, I'm just going to turn off my phone because there seems to be too many people calling me. So just want to, sorry. So Srimad Bhagavatam also is offering a different aspect to it as well. Srimad Bhagavatam fundamentally is also going to give us an opportunity in Kali Yuga to make advancement. What is the distinction? In the first canto of Srimad Bhagavatam, we notice Parikshit Maharaj coming in touch with Sukadev Goswami. And what is Sukadev Goswami doing? He is speaking the Srimad Bhagavatam. Parikshit Maharaj is hearing Srimad Bhagavatam. The Bhagavatam, right at the onset of Kali Yuga, is giving us a message saying, in Kali Yuga, we are going to be completely incapacitated and without any capacity for sadhana. Your purpose in Kali Yuga is for you to listen. Shanvatam Swakata Krishna. Shanvatam Swakata Krishna. You have to listen to Krishna Katha. If you listen to Krishna Katha, the speaker's motivation, the purity of the speaker, the conception of who Krishna is and the sambandha of the speaker with Krishna, in other words, the relationship of the speaker of Srimad Bhagavatam with Krishna will flow in sound vibration and reach our ears, and in so doing so, it would create a sambandha, a connection between us and Krishna. The idea is the sound vibration coming from the speaker of Srimad Bhagavatam carries the vibrations of the relationship of the speaker with Krishna. And when they speak, when the pure souls speak, then they have the ability to convey the motivation or their connection to Krishna through their speech, through the sound vibration, and automatically that becomes a transformative experience. So the Srimad Bhagavatam is basically telling us, in Kali Yuga, you begin by hearing. Shrunvatam. You just have to hear because you have no capacity for any kind of sadhana. Sadhana in Kali Yuga is a challenge because we really can't do what is required to be a sadhana siddha, to attain perfection purely based on sadhana. It's almost an impossibility given the schedules and given the distractions that we have in Kali Yuga. So Srimad Bhagavatam is saying, there's a way out of this. Listen to Srimad Bhagavatam. It's practically saying everything else is useless. You have to listen, which is the reason why it was demonstrated right at the onset of Kali Yuga. Srimad Bhagavatam was spoken by Sukadev Goswami. It was demonstrated that this is the process. So there was glorification and there was listening. There was kirtan and then there was shravanam. There was shravanam, kirtanam. In the sense, basically, someone had heard it and someone is speaking. Sukadev Goswami had heard it from his father, and then coupled with his realizations made the recitation of Srimad Bhagavatam even sweeter. It's being passed on to Parikshit Maharaj. While it is being passed on to Parikshit Maharaj, there is Sutta Goswami, who is one of the sages in audience. He is listening to Srimad Bhagavatam in that particular small gathering with Sukadev Goswami and Parikshit Maharaj. He gathers the Srimad Bhagavatam, couples it, and transforms it in his heart with his realizations. He is now sharing his realizations and answering questions to the sages in Naimisharanya. So this is basically someone speaking, someone hearing, and the speaker's motivation, the speaker's connection and the relationships with the Lord, the speaker's blessings are then passed on to the sound vibration to whoever is hearing, and then they have the ability to go and speak again based on their own realizations and experiences, because now they are being transformed by the speaker. So this is the channel, this is the disciplic succession. And this is how Srimad Bhagavatam is being passed on. And it's giving us a message saying this is the only thing that's going to work. This is the only thing it's going to work. Srimad Bhagavatam talks about the glorification of the holy names in the beginning, in the middle, and in the end. Now, in the first session, we also spoke about the distinction between the objectives of being liberated versus the objective of coming in touch with Srimad Bhagavatam. And we spoke about it earlier in today's session. Being liberated and being free of matter, being outside of the material sphere, does not mean there is a relationship with God. The very famous Gayatri mantra, which you hear very often when you travel in India, Tat Savitur Varenyam Bhargo Devasya Dhimahi Dhiyo Yona Prachodayat. This is from the Rig Veda. It's actually quite pure. It is one of the most powerful mantras from the Rig Veda. And this Gayatri mantra, Brahma Gayatri mantra as it is called, has the ability to take the soul from the material sphere and release them into the spiritual sphere. However, this mantra does not have the ability to give a relationship with Krishna. The relationship with Krishna is going to be given by Harinam. It is going to be given by the topic of Srimad Bhagavatam, which is the reason why the first verse of the Srimad Bhagavatam starts with the Gayatri. It is practically the first verse of the Srimad Bhagavatam addresses the topic of the Gayatri mantra. Where the Gayatri mantra's jurisdiction ends, you have the beginning of Srimad Bhagavatam. The Gayatri mantra's jurisdiction is Krishna as God, as the Samam Bonam, as the creator, maintainer, destroyer. One is liberated from their conditioning by chanting of the Gayatri mantra. However, the jurisdiction of the Gayatri mantra ends, Srimad Bhagavatam begins. One who is liberated is not necessarily completely satisfied. Srimad Bhagavatam is also meant for those who are liberated. Sukadev Goswami was liberated. He was a Brahmavadi, Brahmabhuta Prasannatma. He was not in touch with matter at all, even though he was only 16 years old when he was reciting the Srimad Bhagavatam. He was not in touch with matter. He was liberated. But the moment he heard Krishna Katha from Srila Vyasadeva, this liberated personality became so attracted that he sat down and he heard the entire Srimad Bhagavatam from his father. So this is meant for those who are liberated as well, and as well for those who are conditioned. When we chant the daily prayers, the invocation prayers before we begin the Srimad Bhagavatam class, we literally are saying we want to experience Krishna Katha, we want to be released from the clutches of the lower modes of nature, we want to be situated in the pure mode of transcendental goodness, because that's the beginning of relationships. Krishna's relationships will begin when we are situated beyond matter. Being beyond matter is the topic of liberation. Our daily invocation prayers of Srimad Bhagavatam are basically saying, release me from passion, release me from, get a release from passion and ignorance, be situated in pure goodness. Use that as a platform. The mode of goodness is to be used as a platform. Brahma Bhuta Prasannatma, which is to be liberated from passion and ignorance, is beyond the material universe. But that's where you have to be to begin a relationship with Krishna. Is everybody able to hear me clearly, or is it coming in interruptions? Because I'm not sure if my internet is functioning as well. Can someone confirm if this is all right?
Yes, Prabhu, we are able to hear you.
Okay, very good. Let me continue then. So the jurisdiction of Srimad Bhagavatam begins there. So the person who is liberated can relish Srimad Bhagavatam and feel very fulfilled. Why? Because now the person who is liberated has the ability to develop relationships with Krishna. So the holy names, when we chant them, they have the ability to take us from our conditioning by passion and ignorance all the way to pure goodness. And they also have the ability to give us a relationship with Krishna. Holy names, Krishna and Rama, basically Hare, Krishna and Rama, the three words, all of these are Krishna's, non-different from Krishna, Nama Naminoho Abhinatvam. So when we chant the holy names, we come in touch with Krishna. Nama becomes situated in our heart, and then we develop a relationship with the Lord. This whole process requires transcending matter. It requires leaving the conditioning of passion and ignorance and then reaching the pure platform of goodness, using that as a platform to make an accelerated attempt to come in touch and serve Krishna to develop a relationship. So liberation means freedom from passion, ignorance. And after liberation, coming in touch with Krishna and developing this relationship with Krishna, that is the topic of Srimad Bhagavatam. So Srimad Bhagavatam begins where the jurisdiction of being liberated ends. The first verse is the Srimad Bhagavatam. In the Srimad Bhagavatam talks about the Gayatri. That's the objective of the Gayatri, is to take us out of the material sphere. And once we reach above the material sphere, we are in a relationship with the Lord. The same thing happens during our sadhana. During our sadhana, we cross over anartha, nivritti. Anarthas are nothing but contaminations of passion and ignorance. We relieve ourselves of passion and ignorance, and when we are situated predominantly in good, that is nishta, naishtiki bhakti. That is the message that we read every day before we begin the Bhagavatam class. We say that by hearing Srimad Bhagavatam, one has the ability to relieve themselves of passion and ignorance and situate themselves with complete freedom and become fixed in this connection with Krishna. So our sadhana of Harinam takes us through the process of relieving us from passion and ignorance, situating us in the platform of Brahmabhuta Prasannatma, which is a liberated platform, and then also simultaneously connecting us to Krishna along the way, giving us the relationship with Krishna, which even those who are liberated seek. So this is the beauty of our process. This is the beauty of Mahaprabhu's gift to us in Harinam, and that is being supplemented, that is being supported by Srimad Bhagavatam. This is Krishna as the Nama, Krishna as Srimad Bhagavatam, and the devotees of Krishna, and Krishna as the Murti. So the 5 Angas. The first Anga is Nama Smaranam. Sorry, the first Anga is Sadhu Sangha. When we come in touch with sadhus, the internal realizations and the meditations of the sadhu reach our ears, and it becomes transformative because they carry relationships. Those relationships with Krishna are passed on to us through the sound vibration coming from their lips. When we come in touch with sadhu, the faith of the sadhu is passed on to us through their vibration, sound vibration. And once we receive those sound vibrations through our ears, then they become transformative in our heart. They get rid of the contamination, and one is able to proceed further. Then one slowly, steadily improves their chanting. So this is faith. The giving of faith is through sound vibration, sadhu sangha. And then we have nama smaranam, nama kirtan. We chant nama. And then we have Bhagavat Shravanam. Hear the Srimad Bhagavatam. One comes in touch with sadhu, one is motivated to chant nicely. If you chant nicely, then you get to hear Srimad Bhagavatam nicely. And once that is done, then one has the motivation of wanting to serve Krishna in the Archavigraha form, in the deity form. Then one has the motivation of wanting to be in Vrindavan, or be in a consciousness where you feel that there's nothing more important than wanting to remain in Vrindavan and chant. So this is the 5 different angas which are considered to be the most important ones by our acharyas, by our predecessors. So this is basically what we are trying to convey here as well. So the point we just want to make here is that the Srimad Bhagavatam study, which we are going to begin on a chapter by chapter basis, ultimately has to support the conclusion and the desires of Mahaprabhu. It has to support the conclusion and the desires of Mahaprabhu. What is the desire of Mahaprabhu? He was giving us the Yuga Dharma. If your work and if your activity in sadhana and if the teaching of Srimad Bhagavatam does not support the Yuga Dharma, then we are not doing it the way Mahaprabhu would want us to do it. If you hear Srimad Bhagavatam and it motivates you to pick up your beads because coming in touch with Krishna in the Nama Rupa, in terms of his Nama, hearing the Nama in our hearts and being able to manifest the Nama in our hearts completely free of any kind of, I would say, fluctuation, being able to situate Krishna in our hearts as Nama, becoming attached to Nama, automatically brings us further and further in touch with Krishna. Then the Nama in our heart, the name Krishna in our heart becomes Krishna himself, because there's no difference. So the purpose of Srimad Bhagavatam discussions that we are going to have is ultimately to focus on motivating us to be free from passion and ignorance, which is the objective of Srimad Bhagavatam study, and also to be completely attached to the holy names. If we don't align ourselves with the objective of Mahaprabhu, then there is no point, because the Yuga Dharma is to chant the holy names. So we study Srimad Bhagavatam, motivate ourselves to be free from passion and ignorance, because coming in touch with Bhagavatam automatically has the ability to relieve us and take us beyond the material sphere. and then we also get motivated to chant the holy names. So which is going to be how we are going to proceed. That's going to be the objective that's going to be set by us. So I'll stop here after a quick summary. I'll see if there are any comments or questions, and then we could end today's session, and then we could come back fresh next week, and we could begin a chapter-wise study. So today we touched upon the fundamental aspect of how Srimad Bhagavatam is different from the descriptions of the Lord in other scriptures. We talked about the despondency of Srila Vyasadeva. We talked about the distinction between the conception of God versus absolute truth. We talked about the objectives of Srimad Bhagavatam. We talked about the non-difference of Srimad Bhagavatam from Krishna. We also spoke a little bit about the idea of Mahaprabhu's Yuga Dharma being integrated, and if that's the way we want to achieve things as well. In other words, we want to do things exactly in line with the Yuga Dharma. We want to motivate people to chant. We also want to relieve people, and we want to relieve each other in terms of me as a speaker and you as a listener. And as we interact with each other during these sessions, we want to strategize so that we could move further and further away from the challenges of passion and ignorance, which could involve certain practical discussions as well. And as we study with this focus, we'll study the personalities of Bhagavatam, and we will learn further. So this would be a chapter-wise study. We'll begin with the first chapter summary the next session, but I thought I'll just give a brief introduction because there are quite a few newcomers. So any questions or comments, please? We have a few minutes.
Hare Krishna, Lord.
Yes, Ravindra.
Yeah, I have several questions actually. I will quickly ask. Beginning from when you say that when we fulfill our duties properly, then we gain the piety and riches. So here there will be confusion, like when it comes to our duties, is it completely related to our work or duties as a husband? All these things will be there, right? So when it comes to work also, sometimes I feel like the work I'm doing makes not much sense. So in my mind, some kind of negligence comes. It doesn't make sense. So as just for money we are doing kind of thing. So should I?
Okay, so I think I should clarify this. Sorry to interrupt you. I should just clarify this. Yeah, perhaps it could change some of the other questions that you have in your mind. Yeah.
Yes.
Basically, when I said dharma, when I said duty, I did mean we have to act according to the principles of varnashrama. However, what I was actually wanting to say is that sometimes performing our duty, because we are in a certain varna, because we are in a certain ashram, there are duties born out of that varna and ashram, and we have to perform those duties. But we do not want to get misled into thinking that those duties are the goal of life. They are not the goal of life. We perform those duties without any expectations for results. Nishkama yoga. We want to offer the karma that we do, we want to offer all the results to Krishna. We practically want to act out, and we want to set objectives as defined by Srimad Bhagavatam while living in a modern world, executing our duties and by offering the results to Krishna. So the idea is that we do not want basically to understand duties as being isolated and in a manner from Krishna consciousness. Krishna consciousness and the purpose of defined by Srimad Bhagavatam is our main focus. However, we are in a certain body and we have a certain varna, we have a certain ashram. We belong to either the Grahastha ashram, Brahmacharya ashram, Vichava ashram. We are also performing a certain profession. When we are in such professions, we don't develop aspirations and goals in that profession. We perform those professions as a matter of duty, saying, I'm here, I'm supposed to do this, I'm supposed to take care of the family. This is the kind of profession which has been offered to me. This is what I'm doing for a living, but this is not me. The job is not me. This is not the goal of life. The goal of life is what I do as per the teachings of Srimad Bhagavatam. So we want to be very careful in not getting misled into thinking that the idea of duty is for us to simply do what we do on a day-to-day basis, because if you don't set transcendental goals while approaching mundane life, which is varna and ashram, then the varna and ashram could be a huge distraction. Meaning if you do not have goals of wanting to serve Krishna, if you do not have goals of Krishna consciousness, and then you start looking at life from the perspective of those goals, if you don't do that, then life itself could be a huge distraction. We would start running on a parallel track, and it may lead not so much to such auspiciousness. So we want to set goals within Krishna consciousness and tolerate the circumstances of Varna and Ashrama while performing duties there. However, in the case of the devotee, the maintenance of the devotee and the fulfillment of desires of the devotee, the whole idea of resources and everything that is required will be provided by Krishna. We are not dependent on performing our duties to sustain ourselves. Does it make difference to you? Does it make sense? Yeah. The definition I had given earlier was a regular definition which is given in the Vedas. The Vedas are saying you perform your duty, which essentially means engage according to your varna. There are many, many duties and intricacies involved in each and every varna. There are many, many duties and intricacies involved in each and every ashram. Perform your duties based on varna and ashram. As you do your duties based on shastric conclusions in the varna
I'm
and
still
ashram.
listening to the class. What you saying? I was.
Sorry, could we mute ourselves, please? Yeah. Can you kindly mute yourself, everybody? Yeah, sorry. So basically what I'm trying to say is that we would need to set duties based on transcendental life. We would need to, set goals based on transcendental life. We tolerate the circumstances of Varnashram. Sometimes it is auspicious, sometimes it is inauspicious. Sometimes there could be economic success, sometimes there could be economic failure. Sometimes there could be success in relationships, and sometimes there could be failure in relationships. We tolerate those circumstances and yet follow those carefully while focusing on the goals given by Srimad Bhagavatam. Does it make sense? We don't want to get distracted by thinking that the goal of life is to perform the duties which are related to Varnashram. Yes, those are important. We tolerate those circumstances. We do it nicely as if, it's our responsibility. In reality, we have to understand that Krishna is maintaining us. It has nothing, the devotee life is not so much being maintained by pious results. No, we have offered everything to Krishna. If Krishna desires, he will maintain us in any which way he wants. Does it make sense, Ravindra?
Yes, bro. Actually, my problem, whatever you said is true. Our specific problem I'm facing is when I am at work, like 8 hours or 9 hours or whatever, I'm not able to focus 100% on my work. In between, I will get distracted. I will listen to some songs or lectures, or I will talk to someone. So I feel like guilty, like maybe I'm not doing perfectly. Whenever I'm at work, I should perform 100%. That's what I'm not able to do.
Okay, good. See, when you are at work, please do work 100%. That's what you're supposed to do. Does it make sense? You don't have to feel bad about doing things that are allowing you to carry on your varna and your ashram, your duties. You don't have to feel bad about it at all, because that's exactly what is required. But we have to have a careful understanding that that's not the goal of life. We do everything nicely at work. It doesn't mean we neglect our duties. But we don't set that as the goal of life. That's not the standard we want to adhere to. Our standard is far, far higher. So we set a standard of life based on Srimad Bhagavatam. So we say, what is it which is going to allow me to chant nicely? What is it which is going to allow me to have better sangha? This is how we plan our life in general. Do you understand? That's the difference. But we should not neglect, and we should not actually be negligent towards what is required at the workplace. I want to be very clear on that. Devotees do that. Sometimes they're not very motivated with what goes on at the workplace. As a consequence, they end up wanting to kind of, they feel it's nicer for them to just engage in devotional service. If you do it every once in a while, it's okay. If it is going to affect your work, then it's time for you to consider that carefully. It's important for you to do what is required at the workplace. Yeah, does it make sense?
Yes, bro. Yeah.
Good.
One more thing related to this, like it's not that easy to focus on work or even on spiritual thing also. Always these distractions will be there. Either work also I'm not able to take completely 100%, and when it comes to spirituality also, even while chanting or reading or listening, my mind will go here and there. in that case, is there any way to come to a stage where I will focus 100% on what I am doing, either it's bhakti or work?
Yes. You see, you can't solve the work problem by focusing just on the work problem. You need to focus on your spiritual standard. If you become efficient spiritually, then you will have the ability to become efficient materially. If you're able to concentrate during your japa session, that concentration ability would also lend itself very favorably during work. The reason why our minds can't concentrate is because we are in touch with passion, which is the message of Srimad Bhagavatam. As we relieve ourselves of this passion and ignorance, our minds can concentrate and they can absorb and they can do whatever they need. So a mind which is very steady and is able to absorb things is going to be very effective regardless of where it is, whether it's in the material situation or it is spiritual. Does it make sense?
Yes, Prabhu. So we have
So the objective has to be to relieve ourselves from passion and ignorance through the sadhana process.
Yes, Prabhu, that makes sense. Yeah, quickly, can I ask you a few more questions, Prabhu? These are direct questions, no explanation required. Like,
Okay.
so you said this Vedanta is the ultimate thing. So can we skip Vedas and directly jump to Vedanta Sutras?
Well, the Jnani goes to Vedanta Sutras directly. The subject matter of the Vedas is fruitive activity. The Jnani says, I'm not interested in the fruits of this world because they're all going to turn sour at some point. Let me go directly to the process of liberation. They go into Gyan, which is the Vedanta Sutra. So you will notice many of the Shankarite groups studying Vedanta Sutra, but we don't need to do that. Srimad Bhagavatam is a natural commentary on Vedanta Sutra. So we don't even have to bother with the Vedas or the Vedanta Sutra, just focus on Srimad Bhagavatam.
Yes, Prabhu. And one more question is it during that class you said like coming to the having no sense gratification, all that. So whatever we are doing, the sadhana and discussions, all these, if we achieve a stage where 0% sense gratification, is that like achieving our ultimate goal?
Actually, when I say sense gratification, lack of sense gratification, it is not a forced suppression of who we are as a personality or our motivation for happiness. Devotional service, nothing is forced upon us. In sadhana bhakti, we force ourselves, but we force ourselves simply because we have attained a higher taste. We are saying, I have attained a higher taste. Now I like eating only prasadam, so I'm going to go through some austerity in just wanting to eat prasadam. Do you understand what I'm saying? Because we've developed a higher taste. Yes. Similarly, we have developed a higher taste in terms of how we're going to obtain pleasure. As a consequence, we avoid things that we used to do before because we have no taste for it, because we have attained a higher taste. So is the goal of sadhana bhakti to attain ultimately the point where there is zero sense gratification? The point is that's not the goal. The goal of sadhana bhakti, the goal of our coming into the process of devotional service is for us to develop a relationship with Krishna. The lack of interest in mundane sense gratification is simply a natural course because it is of a very low grade and low class happiness. It would automatically be given up as one comes closer and closer to the greater, more, I would say, fulfilling and uninterrupted nature of happiness which comes from spirituality. So it's not a matter of suppression, it is a matter of natural transformation, because one says, I don't like this because it's so bad, I like something better because I've tasted it. Does it make sense? That is not the goal. The goal of devotional service is not just to cease anything or anything like that. The goal of devotional service is to develop a relationship with Krishna. Everything else is simply a matter of course because it's natural.
Yes, bro. Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah,
bro. Yeah, that's clear, bro. One more thing, bro. Like, what is meant by when you say disappearance of Srimad Bhagavatam? I can understand clearly the disappearance of Krishna when he was here and then he disappeared. But Bhagavatam will be there forever, right? Then how does that make sense? Disappearance of Bhagavatam.
Well, the manifestation and the non-manifestation can happen. For instance, consider this: 500 years back, there was only probably 2 or 3 copies of Srimad Bhagavatam because everything was handwritten. Can you consider that? Yeah. So it can disappear people can hold the teachings of Srimad Bhagavatam in their heart, and as the world, for example, gets annihilated at the end of the Yuga, and the end of Lord Brahma's day, at the end of Lord Brahma's, I would say, what do you call it, lifespan, when the universe gets annihilated, the so-called book representations will go away, but then Srimad Bhagavatam appears again. Does it make sense?
Yeah. Somebody has to again recite it and tell like.
No, Krishna, just as Krishna has conducted his pastimes, and Krishna conducts his pastimes in the spiritual sky. When we see it as being conducted in Uttar Pradesh in India, it is because a portion of the spiritual sky is descendant here. It is here in Vrindavan. This never disappears. It never goes anywhere. The world as we see it is destroyed. The spiritual sky remains. And then it manifests again in terms of actual vision, where in some yuga, somewhere, Krishna avatar would take place. Does it make sense?
Yes, bro. But yeah.
Exactly the same way Srimad Bhagavatam also manifests and unmanifests.
Okay. Yes, bro. Sure, bro. One more question, bro. When you said like keeping Bhagavatam at home is very, very important, are there any rules and regulations to keep Bhagavatam, or anyone can keep Bhagavatam? Can we present to anyone, irrespective of
You
what?
can present, which is the whole objective of our movement, is we distribute Srimad Bhagavatam to everybody. And I gave this story as well, that even if someone were to keep Srimad Bhagavatam, someday they realize that they have some book there on the shelf, they pick it up, their life would change. So yes, it's our
Okay.
objective.
So is it irrespective of their religion or whatever their beliefs?
Doesn't matter. Doesn't matter.
Okay. Even ourselves also, even though we don't read it or properly not follow principles, but still we can take the book, see whenever possible the photos or whatever, read something. So there are no rules.
Which is, well, see, there are rules and regulations in terms of doing things nicely, which are always helpful. But what I don't want to do is get so caught up in just following some rules and regulations, because some people wrap Srimad Bhagavatam wonderfully in silk cloth and they don't even open it. So there's no point in discussing that. Our objective is to reach Srimad Bhagavatam.
Yes, Prabhu. Actually, I'm asking this because some people, they reject even Bhagavad Gita also, saying even though they are Hindus, or they feel like I'm not following, I eat meat, I drink, so better you give to someone.
No,
like
no, there is no restriction. We don't need to restrict anyone.
Okay, thank you so much, Prabhu. Yeah. One more question, Prabhu, please.
Go ahead, please.
Yeah, about the Gayatri Mantra you talked. So I see some people, they just chant Gayatri Mantra, but in ISKCON I heard that only Brahmana initiated people has to say Gayatri Mantra. That too, we are not supposed to say loudly the way we say the Hare Krishna Mantra. So what is your comment on this, Prabhu? Gayatri Mantra, is the anyone can recite?
Well, see, there are 2 points. Number one, the Gayatri Mantra, to my understanding, Gayatri Mantra, there are certain seed syllables which are attached to the Gayatri Mantra while being initiated. Anybody can chant Tat Savitur Varenyam Bhargo Devasya Dhimahi Dhyo Yo Na Prachodayat, because that's from the Rig Veda. You can chant it. But there are certain seed syllables that are given, some bija aksharas that are given along with it during initiation. That is never revealed other than chanting it in silently. Yeah? So the point I'm trying to make is there's a distinction between the two. So the right and actual tradition is to keep it confidential, but there are certain aspects of it which can be chanted openly, some which you have to keep confidential.
Okay, Prabhu. So whatever we are listening outside when we go to temple, it's being played in speakers.
It doesn't matter.
Okay.
It doesn't matter. We don't have to worry about it at all. Yeah, we don't have to worry about
it. We can listen and we can chant also. That's not a problem.
Yeah, that's all right.
Okay.
We can chant the Harinam because Harinam is more inclusive of everything.
Okay. Thank you so much, Prabhu. Yeah, that's all.
Not at all. Any other question or comment, please, from anyone else? Actually, someone wrote me a text message. I'm not going to read the message out loud. You could just identify yourself because I don't know who wrote me that. Then I could just comment on it more from a, I would say,
It was me, Prabhu. Audarya Gauchandra
okay.
Das.
Audarya Gaurchandra Das. Okay. Okay. So can I read the question?
Yes.
Okay. In the beginning of the class, you mentioned we come to the next stage after we become sick and tired of material life. But in modern day, we hear so much about being grateful and positive. How can we become sick and tired if we think in this way? What is the balance? Because then we will think it's a part of life and not push ourselves spiritually. So is your question on the whole idea of being grateful and positive? We are going to be grateful and positive for the spiritual opportunity that we receive. And we have to accept the bad conditions of life as also a part of the gift that Krishna has given us for us to come closer to him. So we don't need to think that the circumstances of life, if they are challenging, are separate from Krishna. The circumstances of life, even if they are challenging, can be thought of as a gift from Krishna. We can simply say, Krishna, you have arranged this for me so that I could come closer to you. The challenges of life in general could be our karmic reactions. But when we start thinking that Krishna has arranged it, it would become Krishna's arrangement. So we don't need to become artificially positive and grateful. We can actually become positive and grateful in the real sense by introducing Krishna into our life fully and accepting the arrangements in life as being made by Krishna for us to come closer to him. Then we would see the purpose of such suffering. Then we would see the ability to be able to move forward. See, a spiritualist is able to understand the whole concept of material exhaustion. The materialist is afraid to talk about material exhaustion because what is left in life if people can't be happy with their senses? This is the reason why people are so afraid of basically being devoid of happiness, which are associated with the senses, because they can't really conceive of any happiness beyond the senses. How can I be happy if my senses are not satisfied? So the point is that we are not basically concerned about it because we know that material exhaustion is basically going to be rewarded with spiritual fulfillment. And it is a precursor. Material exhaustion is a precursor because the attempts to material sense gratification is a precursor, but it has to go hand in hand with attempts to increase our spiritual standard. It can't be one or the other. In most cases, people, if not in this lifetime, in prior lifetimes, have exhausted their attempts before they come into a movement. They have. If not in this lifetime, in the previous lifetime, they would have exhausted their attempts at sense gratification. Then they come in touch with spirituality. The mercy is given. And then those who have exhausted it fully take off like a rocket. Those who are yet to learn certain things in life go through life, and then slowly, steadily, they understand that, yes, the standard of happiness that we are choosing is low class because now we are experiencing something which is high class. Let's move towards it. The problem with devotees is as follows, and I'm making a very clear statement. And I notice this because I travel. I also notice this because I speak to so many devotees around the world. The problem with practitioners of Krishna consciousness in the modern day is they don't pursue Krishna consciousness 100% and put all they have into it. And they have also stopped their so-called material life. Now the senses have been disengaged from material life. They're not fully engaged in spiritual life. As a consequence, they're walking the middle road and they get frustrated. They're saying, I can't feel anything. What is this all about? Sometimes it's so frustrating. Yeah, it's because they are not putting their 100% into spiritual life. They are still trying to figure things out on the material side. But they've stopped that, they've stopped this. It's just, they're walking in the middle. That's not the solution. That's the reason why many devotees struggle. And sometimes they think that this is a chore, this is hardship, this is just an austerity. They think of all of this in Krishna consciousness because they're not putting their 100% into it. And they have somewhat stopped or minimized the sense gratification, which is good, but then they've minimized it as a consequence. They're stuck in the middle. They just don't know which is where things are going to be. So that's the issue. The issue is it's the middle road. And one can never be happy in the middle road. One has to plunge, take up Krishna consciousness fully. Then they will realize that now they are literally in transcendence. They're basically able to take it up. They at least have to learn to desire properly. That's the purpose of attending classes, because the speakers can motivate desires. That's the whole idea of preaching, is to motivate right desires. I hope that answers your questions, Audarya.
Thank you, Prabhu.
Sure. Anybody else? Okay, I'll just give around 20 seconds.
Yeah.
Oh, Ravindra, yes?
Yeah, this is not a question, but today the plan is like to discuss on Kunti Devi, right? Great devotees.
Correct.
So that is kept again like for next week, or because today we covered.
No, we are going to basically cover the glories of Kunti Devi as we go along the chapter-wise discussions, because there's an entire chapter dedicated to her praise. So we're going to cover that along.
Hare Krishna, I think the connection got lost in Vrindavan, so.
Okay, Mataji.
Unless anyone have more questions, they can write down maybe on a group, and then probably we'll end session for today. Because Shivandavan Prabhu, I think connection there is lost as well. So thank you so much everyone for attending, and yeah, if you have any question, please send it in a group. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna. Thank you very much.